Hello and welcome to my first commentator tutorial on how to do vanilla tender swaps for Riveter. Now, what I mean is, they're basically just modifying the base game files is what it is. Don't worry, it's incredibly easy to go and do. It's not difficult at all. Even if you never coded before, this is incredibly easy to go and do because you're only changing one section of one line of code is literally all you're doing. You're not doing anything else. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to your Steam Apps Common Riveter folder and then go to Riveter Data. Go to Streaming Assets and Asset Packs. This in here, and if people have installed mods, I'm guessing, if any of you have actually installed mods, you know this folder, and this is where you put stuff that doesn't use, like Unity Mod Manager and everything else, to actually go and load it. You have to install it directly into the game. But this is basically where you want to go. Now, I'm going to go and give the, where the heck the S51 is in here. The S51, right here, the Berkshire tender, just like the, just like the Erie had. That's what it was. Yeah, just like the Erie had. So, I use Notepad++ for this. You don't have to go and get this, honestly, to go and actually modify these things. You can always just go get, Notepad here, just regular Notepad. What you're going to do is you have the identifier for the locomotive, right? Now, for the base game, they're named essentially this, which is, I guess, Locomotive Steam. I don't know what his naming convention is for these things, but it's essentially this, but with T at the end, is pretty much what it is for the tender. No, it's LT. Yeah, Locomotive Steam or something. I don't know what the LS stands for exactly. I'm thinking it's Locomotive Steam, but yeah. So instead, it's LT is what it is, right? You see here? Now, what you're going to want to do here is find the tender identifier inside the file. Usually it's pretty much right at the top of the base game stuff. It's very easy to go and find. And this also does work for modded things too, by the way, if you want to go swap through tenders and that sort of thing. Because, pretty much all you're doing here is just swapping the asset directly versus making a clone of it or anything else. But yeah, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go copy this. So the tender, ID name is what this is, the tender identifier for the locomotive that you have here. And then go find a locomotive you actually want to go swap the tender out on. Now, the one thing to note is you're going to want to make backups of all of these things, which I did over here. Original files. Make copies of these, because otherwise you're not just going to be able to go directly back to using the original base game, configuration for everything, because it's like, well, you've already overwritten the file. And yes, these are in the definitions file, by the way. This is actually where they are, not in the catalog section of this. So yeah, pretty much you just go down, find the tender you want to go and swap. The dash is in here with Notepad++. If you double click on something, it doesn't want to go and replace it. So it's like, but yeah, pretty much you just select this, and then you go and paste it into there. And now the tender identifier for this locomotive is now the B65's tender, right? I go and save that real quick, and I can go load up Riveter. And I can show you immediately then as well that it does not modify existing stuff. That's the other thing about this, is that once you purchase or place down the locomotives with these swapped tenders here, it does not go and actually revert them or anything. That's the one thing that I think a lot of people would probably be asking and whatnot is, okay, does it go and revert the tender back if I go and swap it out or change the tender on existing equipment? No, it doesn't do that. Alrighty, and here we are in game. And obviously, you can see immediately I already placed down an S51 to show you as an example here that, hey, it does not actually go and swap out existing equipment that you have in the game. So, yeah, that's now here. So now if we go over to the S51 and scroll down to here, and go and add this, if you go and place it, you see it has the Berk tender behind it now, instead. That thing is so massive, I honestly didn't even realize how big it was. That's funny. Ugh. Well, yeah, that's basically how you do vanilla base game tender swaps. Now, obviously, the thing about this is you have this tender on this thing forever until you actually go swap the files back. Now, what I did with this instead was, if we actually go and just hide everything real quick here, right? I have modified train files, right, is what I made here. So you can see all this. I have different variations of all of these different things. So like if I go into, let's say, the C55, for example, I have it with a 210.2 tender, the B65, and the P43 tender. So I made different variations that are just copy-pastable. pretty much what I did here is I have the folder that I can just copy this into the asset packs section over here. I can just copy this immediately in the asset pack section, and it will go and replace the C55 here, right? Is exactly what it'll go into. This is just the definitions file of that locomotive with the tender swapped out, and boom, I can go and copy it. It's that easy. And if I want the vanilla thing, all I have to go and do is go to the original files in here, and then just copy this over. That's really about it. It's that easy. So, yeah, obviously the one thing you do have to go and do, and the one thing to keep in mind, is to swap stuff out, you have to actually go and exit the game. You have to go and exit the save that you're in currently, and everything. So, like, I can't just go and swap this mid-game. So that's one of the things about it. However, the thing about this configuration with it as well is that the store is actually client-side. That's something a lot of people probably don't even know, is that the store here is actually client-sided. So, one person in a game, like if you're playing multiplayer, right? One person in a game can have the tender swaps for something else. So, like, one person could be running the S51 with a Berkshire tender, or the vanilla configuration, or whatever else. You know, you got multiple different people with different configurations of things, and each person can buy the equipment, but each and every single person that buys that equipment, it's on their machines. Like, stuff. It's their machine stuff that they're buying, right? So if I go into a multiplayer game, I'm going to be buying this right now. I'm going to be buying the S51 with this tender, right? Or I already have the C55 swapped out as a perfect example. I have the C55 already with the F71 tender, aka the 210-2 right there. I'm going to be buying this configuration of multiplayer because the store is actually client-sided. It goes and pulls the client's store versus whatever the host is instead. So the host can have whatever the heck they want, and anybody in the game can have whatever they want in terms of configurations of this, and they'll be able to buy their own individual thing. So you can have multiple different people, in theory, have multiple different configurations to be able to go and buy stuff for somebody if they wanted to do that. Because, yeah, it's like you could have the host essentially hosting the server, and then other people going in and out of the game and being able to swap things without having to have the server go down. That's pretty much about it. But, yeah, that's effectively how you go and swap tenders in the vanilla game. And yes, these will keep the tender for forever, because Raritor doesn't care about essentially what tender's behind a locomotive. It just cares that a locomotive has a tender. That's literally all it cares about. It doesn't care about anything else. So, like, this, now I can go save and quit, right? I can go quit. And what I can do is just do a little bit of Control Z here and put it back to the original tender that I had, and then launch the game again. Yeah, I have shaders on, by the way, if people didn't even know. Yes, you can actually install shaders into into Raritor as well, so that's actually another, I guess, little thing that you can do. Reshade is what it's called, is the shader that is, like, I guess, more or less directly compatible with this and that sort of thing. Reshade is used in quite a few different things. Trains started using it full-time, like Trains Railroad Simulator. They started using it as, like, their actual shader for stuff. It's really interesting. But if we go to the S51, you can see now it's back to the original configure, well, the original tender, basically, as you can see. And this guy still has the perk tender, right? So, yeah. But yeah, it's as easy as that to go and swap these. And yeah, these will show up in multiplayer for everybody. You don't have to worry about incompatibility or any of that sort of thing. It's perfect. It's great. It works fine. Now, the one disclaimer I want to go and say is that this doesn't work with every locomotive. The K35 Logging Mikado, for example, this doesn't work with this because of how they configured the thing. The attachment point for the tender is, like, up here in this thing, so anytime you try to swap the tenders out on this thing, the tender's, like, clipping into the cab majorly. So you cannot do this with the K35. You'd actually have to go get the mod to be able to go and swap the tenders out on this thing, because however this was made with whatever they wanted to do with the attachment point, with the tender actually essentially quote-unquote couples to the locomotive, they just put it way too far forward, versus it should be, like, back here somewhere. But no, it's, like, actually under... It's actually, like, under the firebox or something here, and or right next to the trailing truck on this thing. It's pretty ridiculous how far forward it actually is when you look at the model. But yeah, otherwise everything should be okay depending on what you swap out. Now, obviously, not every tender might line up perfectly. With with this, for example, I think this, yeah, this actually lines up okay. Obviously, like the actual deck here is not perfect on this thing, so it's not really like great with some of the things. But I mean, that's just the tender size in the first place being so kind of dramatically different. Now, the other example I can give you real quick is actually the C55 in the first place, and what I kind of wanted to go and show first. So this thing, this actually lines up really good, is the funny thing about it. But however, the biggest problem with this thing is the hitboxes on them. As you can see, I can't get in the cab now this direction because the hitbox is in the way on the side of this. So you have to go through the back ladder and basically climb up and over the tender to be able to get inside the cab because you can't actually get out this way anymore because it's just completely blocked, as you can see, due to the hitbox. Like, well, size as well as where it actually is on the thing. So it's like, yeah. Otherwise, it actually works okay for most locomotives, depending on whatever you swap out with, But yeah, it's like, yeah, that's pretty much how you do it, and it's as easy as that. It's not actually super hard, and you're only just changing essentially one line of code effectively in here, and just one section of the line of code really, and it's just the tender identifier that you want to go and look for, and that's it. That's the only thing you need to go and switch, because everything else in this is actually like all the components and stuff of the locomotive. You don't want to go modify any of that. It's literally just the identifier. The tender identifier is the only thing you want to go and modify. But yeah, essentially that is pretty much about it, and I hope this helped people who actually want to go do tender swaps and also keep the vanilla game